Jack drifted in his small battered ship through the vast emptiness of space. The only sound was the hum of the engines as they powered on low fuel. He had been out here for weeks, hunting for scraps, searching for anything he could sell or use. His own ship was barely holding together. The repairs had been minimal, just enough to keep it running. But it was enough for now. His sensors beeped suddenly, pulling him from his thoughts. A faint signal came through, weak and old. The coordinates were marked, an abandoned ship out in the middle of nowhere. Jack knew this could be his chance. Another wreck meant more parts, more supplies, maybe even something valuable. He adjusted his course, heading towards the signal. The ship was a mess. Jack barely registered the structure as he approached. It looked like a ghost ship, torn apart and left to float aimlessly in the vast void. It wasn't the first abandoned ship he had seen out here, but this one was different. There was something about it, something that made him pause before docking. He landed his ship with ease and grabbed his tools. A quick scan showed no major signs of life, no active systems running. Just the cold silence of space. He wasn't expecting anyone, but it was always good to be cautious. After all, even wrecks could hide dangers. The airlock hissed as he opened the door, stepping into the dimly lit hallway of the abandoned ship. The walls were covered in dust, the metal cold under his boots. The ship had been sitting here for a long time, probably years. There were no signs of a crew, no signs of anyone having been there in a long while. Or so Jack thought. He wandered deeper into the ship, his flashlight flickering as it scanned the narrow passageways. His tools clinked as they hung at his side, ready for whatever he needed. He had learned to be quick, careful, and efficient. That's how he survived out here. Then, as he turned a corner, he froze. There, in the middle of what looked like a storage room, was a figure. It wasn't human. Jack's heart skipped a beat. He had read about alien species, seen them in passing, but he had never been this close to one. The figure was small, hunched over, and covered in strange, patchwork clothes. Her skin was a pale shade of blue, her eyes wide with fear. For a moment, Jack couldn't move. The creature, whatever it was, had been hiding, and now it was staring right at him. Then, as quickly as it had happened, the creature turned and bolted. She dashed down the corridor, faster than Jack had expected, disappearing into the shadows. Jack snapped out of his daze. He ran after her, unsure of what to expect. Was she dangerous? Was she some kind of enemy? Or was she just a survivor, like him, trying to make it in this cold, empty universe? He rounded the corner just in time to see the alien girl trying to pry open a door. She was panicked, her breath coming in short bursts. Her hands shook as she struggled with the door's control panel, eyes darting back and forth as if she expected something to come after her. "Hey, wait," Jack called out. But she didn't stop. She didn't even look at him. Jack was close now. He could see the fear in her eyes, the way she trembled as she worked to escape. He didn't know if it was the shock of seeing her or the confusion of the situation, but his heart softened. He knew what it felt like to be alone, to be stranded in a place where there was no one else. The girl's fingers flew over the control panel, but it wasn't enough. The door stayed shut. She looked around in desperation, and Jack saw her eyes narrow. She was looking for another way out. Her panic was palpable, almost contagious. He could hear her ragged breathing as she backed away from the door. "Hey, it's all right," Jack said, trying to keep his voice calm. "I'm not going to hurt you. I just need a few parts from this ship. I won't be here long." But the girl only shook her head, her eyes wide and full of fear. She glanced around, her body tense. Jack wasn't sure if she understood what he was saying, but she definitely didn't trust him. Her eyes flicked to his hands, to the tools hanging from his belt, and she took a step back. Her body pressed against the wall. Jack had to think fast. She was scared. That much was obvious. But why? What was she doing here? Had she been stranded? Like him? Or was there more to the story? He took a slow step forward, trying to reassure her. "I'm not going to hurt you," he repeated. "I'm just trying to fix my ship. I can help you too, if you want." But the girl didn't move. Instead, she glared at him, her posture tense. Then, without warning, she bolted again, running. Down the hall with the speed of someone who had been running from something for a long time. Jack cursed under his breath and chased after her. He didn't know why, but he felt a sense of responsibility. Maybe it was the way she looked at him. Or maybe it was because he couldn't stand to leave someone alone out here in the cold void of space. He rounded the corner just in time to see her disappear into another compartment, a small storage area filled with crates and metal tools. He slowed his pace, trying to make less noise. She was cornered now, and he didn't want to scare her further. He didn't want her to think he was a threat. Jack took a deep breath and stepped forward carefully. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said again, his voice softer now. The girl froze. She didn't turn to face him, but Jack could tell she was listening. There was a long silence before she spoke, her voice shaky but clear. "You're not going to hurt me?" she asked in a soft, almost uncertain tone. Jack smiled, relieved. "No, I'm just here for parts." The girl didn't move, but she didn't run either. Jack took another step closer, keeping his hands visible, showing her he wasn't a threat. Slowly, she turned to face him, her eyes still wary, but there was a flicker of something else, curiosity, maybe your trust. "I'm Jack," he said quietly. "And you are?" The girl hesitated before answering, her voice barely above a whisper. "Leah," she said. "My name is Leah." Jack nodded, still unsure of what was going on. But at least they were talking now. That was a start. Jack sat down on a nearby crate, his mind racing. He had never expected this, finding an alien girl hiding in an abandoned ship in the middle of nowhere. He had thought the ship was empty, a simple target for parts. But now he wasn't so sure. There was more to this story than he could understand. And there was something about Leah, something in the way she looked at him, that made him feel responsible for her, even though they were strangers. Leah stood a few feet away, still unsure of Jack's intentions. She was watching him carefully, her body tense, as if ready to bolt again at any moment. Jack could see the fear in her eyes, the uncertainty. She wasn't used to trusting humans, and who could blame her? Humans weren't exactly known for their kindness to others, especially when it came to aliens. Jack broke the silence, his voice gentle but firm. "You don't have to be scared of me. I'm just here for parts. I won't hurt you." Leah's eyes flickered with doubt, but she didn't run. She was still wary, but at least she wasn't running anymore. Jack took a deep breath, deciding it was time to try something different. "Listen, I know you've been through a lot. I've been out here in space on my own for a while too. It's not easy. But we both need something from this ship, and maybe we can help each other." Leah's eyes narrowed slightly, as if considering his words. She took a small step forward, but she still didn't speak. Jack wasn't sure if she understood fully, but he hoped that by speaking honestly, he could break down some of the walls between them. "I'm not here to hurt you," he repeated. "I've got no interest in fighting anyone. I just need some parts for my ship. I'm stranded out here, just like you." Leah's expression softened slightly, but she didn't say anything. Jack could tell she was thinking, trying to figure out if she could trust him. He couldn't blame her. Trust was a rare thing in space, especially between humans and aliens, but he had to try. For both of their sakes, so Jack said, his voice light. "What's your story? How did you end up here?" Leah's eyes shifted away, as if the question was too much for her. She glanced at the walls, the cold, empty metal of the ship. Her body seemed to shrink in on itself, as if the memories were too heavy to carry. After a long silence, she finally spoke, her voice soft and distant. "My ship, it was attacked. My crew, they..." Her words trailed off and she shook her head, as if pushing the memories away. "I was the only one who made it out. I've been drifting since. Jack felt a pang of sympathy. He knew what it felt like to lose everything. He had lost family, friends, and he'd seen his own ship fall apart more times than he could count. But this was different. Leah was an alien, and she had been alone in space for who knew how long. She had no one. You're the only one left? Jack asked quietly. Leah nodded, her eyes downcast. I've been alone for too long. Jack didn't know what to say. He had been on his own for months, but he still had his ship, and he had always known that he could find a way out. But Leah didn't have that option. She was stuck here, with no ship to call her own, no way to escape. Jack wondered how long she had been drifting, how many times she had tried to fix the ship only to watch it fall apart again. Why did you hide from me? Jack asked, trying to understand. I didn't mean to scare you. Leah's gaze flickered to him for a moment before she looked away again. I didn't know who you were. Humans, they've always been hostile. I thought you were here to take me, to hurt me. Jack winced, understanding. The way she spoke, the fear in her voice, it was clear that she had been through something terrible. She had been alone, isolated, probably hunted, and now she was afraid to trust anyone, even someone who wasn't a threat. I'm not like that, Jack said, his voice firm. I'm not here to hurt you. I won't take anything from you. I just need the parts. You can stay here. You don't have to leave. Leah hesitated, looking at him with a mix of disbelief and confusion. She seemed torn between trusting him and running again. Jack wasn't sure how to prove to her that he wasn't a danger, but he wasn't going to give up. He had to make her understand. Look, Jack said, standing up slowly, I can help you fix this ship. Maybe it won't be much, but it's something. We can get you back home. I'm good with machines. I can help, and you don't have to be alone anymore. For a moment, Leah said nothing. She simply stared at him, as if weighing his words. Jack waited, giving her space, not wanting to rush her. Finally she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. You really think you can fix it? You don't know what you're dealing with. Jack smiled, a little unsure, but trying to stay confident. I've fixed worse. I'm not saying it'll be easy, but I'll give it my best shot. Leah was quiet again, but Jack saw her posture relax just slightly. It was small, but it was something. Maybe she was starting to trust him, just a little. And that was enough for now. Well, Jack said, trying to lighten the mood. Let's start with the basics. I'll see what parts I can salvage, and maybe we can figure out what else you need. I know it's not much, but it's a start. Leah nodded slowly, still unsure, but Jack could see the faintest glimmer of hope in her eyes. She wasn't completely alone anymore. And for the first time in a long time, Jack felt like he wasn't either. Jack and Leah spent the next few hours sorting through the remains of the abandoned ship. Jack was focused on finding anything useful, anything he could repurpose. For his own ship. The old ship was filled with crates, broken consoles, and tangled wires. It was a mess, but to Jack, it was a treasure trove. He was used to fixing things up, making broken parts work again. But the more he explored the ship, the more he realized how much work it would take to get it up and running. Leah had been quiet since their conversation earlier. She still hadn't fully opened up, but Jack could tell she was more at ease now. She didn't run when he came near, and she was slowly starting to help. She pointed out things Jack might have missed, offering small bits of information about the ship's layout, its systems, and what parts were still functional. She didn't say much, but her actions spoke louder than words. Jack was working on the ship's engine room, trying to figure out why the power was still flickering. He had already taken apart a few panels, but the wires inside were completely fried. He sighed, wiping sweat from his brow. The task seemed impossible, but Jack wasn't one to give up easily. He'd fixed worse. You know, I've worked on plenty of ships, Jack said, hoping to break the silence. But this one, it's got me stumped. Leah glanced over at him. her expression unreadable. She was sitting on a crate nearby watching him work. Her hands were still shaking a little, but she wasn't hiding anymore. She was watching Jack, curious but cautious. He could tell she still didn't fully trust him, but there was a shift. She wasn't avoiding him like before. That was progress, right? I didn't think anyone would come for me, Leah said, her voice soft, almost as if she was talking to herself. I thought I'd be stuck here forever. Jack paused, his hands still on the engine. He didn't know what to say. He wasn't used to talking about feelings, especially not his own. He had learned to bottle things up, to focus on survival. But hearing Leah say those words hit him harder than he expected. Not everyone out here is looking to hurt you, Jack replied quietly. Sometimes people just get lost. I'm sure you've been through a lot, but you're not alone anymore. Leah didn't respond right away. She just looked down at her hands, her fingers picking at the fabric of her clothes. Jack wasn't sure if she believed him, but at least she wasn't rejecting him anymore. That was something. They spent the rest of the day working in silence. Jack continued to tinker with the ship's engine, trying to reroute the power. Leah helped when she could, pointing out old tools or parts that might still work. Jack could feel her watching him, studying him, as if she was trying to figure him out. She wasn't ready to fully trust him, but she was letting him get closer, and that was a start. By the time the sun set, the engine was still far from fixed, but they had made some progress. Jack was tired, but he knew he couldn't stop now. Not when there was still so much to do. He stretched and wiped his hands on his pants, taking a seat on the crate next to Leah. So what's your plan after this? Jack asked, trying to make conversation. Once we get the ship up and running, where do you go? Leah was silent for a moment. Jack could see the conflict in her eyes. She wanted to say something, but the words weren't coming. She shifted uncomfortably, her eyes darting away from his. I don't know, Leah finally said. I never really thought about it. I've just been trying to survive. Jack nodded. He understood that feeling. He had never really planned for the future. He just took things one day at a time, surviving, trying to find a way to keep going. But he had never been alone like Leah. He had always known that someone would eventually find him. There was always a way out. But for Leah, this was her life now. She had been alone for so long, and it had changed her. Jack could see that now. She didn't know how to hope anymore. She didn't know what it felt like to have a future. Maybe we can figure it out together, Jack said, trying to sound reassuring. Once the ship's fixed, you can go wherever you want. You don't have to be alone anymore. Leah looked at him, her eyes searching his face for something, but she didn't say anything. She just nodded quietly. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Jack sat back, staring at the engine. The sound of the ship's life support system humming quietly in the background filled the space. It was strange, but the quiet felt comforting. For the first time in a long time, Jack didn't feel completely alone. Maybe he wasn't the only one who needed saving after all. Later that evening, as they ate a small meal of rations, Jack and Leah shared a brief, quiet moment. The food was tasteless, but it didn't matter. They were both just trying to stay focused, to survive. The more Jack thought about it, the more he realized that this was bigger than just fixing a ship. He was helping Leah, yes, but in a way, she was helping him too. He hadn't realized how much he had needed someone else until now. The silence between them wasn't uncomfortable anymore. It felt like a mutual understanding. Jack knew Leah wasn't ready to open up completely, and he wasn't sure he was ready either. But they were both here, surviving together, and that meant something. As the night drew on, Jack made one final check on the engine before settling into his makeshift bed for the night. Leah was already lying down, her eyes closed, but Jack could see the tension in her body. She was still afraid, still unsure, but she was starting to trust him. Jack was starting to trust her too. He closed his eyes, drifting off to sleep, wondering what the next day would bring. He knew it wouldn't be easy, but somehow the thought of doing it together made the challenges seem a little less impossible. The next morning, Jack woke up to a loud mechanical alarm blaring through the ship. He jumped up, startled, his heart racing. For a moment, he thought something had gone wrong with the ship's systems. He scrambled out of his bed and into the control room, his boots echoing on the cold metal floor. Leah was already there, looking equally confused and worried. "What's happening?" Jack asked, his voice tense. "I don't know," Leah replied, her face pale. "I thought it was the engine, but it's not." Jack rushed to the control panel and scanned the data flashing on the screen. His stomach sank. The warning lights were flashing, and a small red blip appeared on the radar. It wasn't a malfunction. Someone was out there. "They're coming." Jack muttered, his mind racing. "We've got company." Leah's face went white. Who's out there?" Jack didn't answer. He was already scrambling to gather his things, pulling tools out of his bag and shoving them into the small compartment. He had no idea who was coming, but he knew one thing for sure: he needed to get out of here, and fast. His ship wasn't ready for a fight, and this abandoned ship certainly wasn't either. "Get to the engine room," Jack said, his voice urgent. "We need to start the engine now." Leah didn't question him. She didn't have to. She understood the urgency in his voice. She nodded quickly and ran toward the back of the ship, her footsteps echoing down the narrow hall. Jack followed close behind, his mind racing. Who could it be? Pirates? A rescue team? It didn't matter. What mattered was getting the ship operational before they arrived. The alarm continued to blare, the sound drilling into Jack's skull. He reached the engine room and immediately got to work, his hands moving quickly over the controls. Leah was already there, looking over the ship's systems. She was trying to help, but Jack could tell she was just as scared as he was. "Can you get it started?" Jack asked, his voice tense. Leah nodded, her hands trembling slightly as she worked the console. "I think so. But it's not going to..." "Be quick, the systems are still fried." "Do your best," Jack urged. "We don't have much time." The sound of a ship's engines roaring to life outside sent a chill down Jack's spine. He could hear the approaching vessel growing louder. It was getting closer. His heart pounded in his chest, and his mind raced. The ship wasn't ready. It wasn't even close to being ready. But they had no choice. They had to try. Jack turned back to the control panel, punching in commands. The ship trembled as the engine struggled to come online. Leah was working feverishly, her face set in concentration. She wasn't giving up, even though it seemed impossible. Jack had to admit, he was impressed by her determination. Despite everything she had been through, despite the fear that still haunted her, she was doing everything she could to help. And that gave him hope. "Almost there," Leah said, her voice steady but strained. "Just a few more seconds." Jack looked up at the radar. The other ship was right on top of them now. There was no more time. He cursed under his breath, his mind racing for a plan. They couldn't outrun them. Not yet, not with a half-functioning engine. But they could still try to hide. "Leah," Jack said, his voice low but firm. "I need you to go to the airlock. Get ready to close it behind me." Leah glanced up, confusion in her eyes. "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to try and hide the ship." "We don't have a choice," Jack replied, his heart pounding. "We need to buy ourselves some time." Leah didn't argue. She nodded and ran toward the airlock, her footsteps echoing in the stillness of the ship. Jack watched her go, then turned back to the controls. The ship was barely moving, but it was enough. For now, the other ship was almost on top of them now. Jack could see it on the radar, a sleek, dark shape, moving faster than he had expected. Whoever they weren't wasting any time. Jack glanced at the control panel again, his hands shaking. He wasn't sure if it would work, but he had to try. With a deep breath, Jack slammed his hand down on the engine override, forcing the power through. The ship jolted, then steadied. The engine hummed, the faint glow of the power core lighting up the room. It wasn't much, but it was enough. For now, Jack sprinted toward the airlock, his heart racing. He didn't look back. All he could think about was getting out of sight before they were discovered. The ship was still shaking, its systems barely holding together, but it was moving. Slowly but moving. Leah was already in the airlock, her fingers hovering over the controls. Jack joined her, standing beside her, his breath coming in quick gasps. They exchanged a look, both of them understanding the gravity of the situation. There was no going back now. The ship outside was so close Jack could feel the pressure building. He wasn't sure what kind of ship it was, but it was large and powerful. And they were coming for them. "Close it," Jack ordered, his voice steady despite the fear gnawing at him. Leah hesitated for a moment, then hit the button. The airlock door slammed shut with a loud hiss, sealing them inside. Jack let out a breath he didn't realize he had been holding. Now they were trapped. But at least they weren't visible. Jack moved to the console, trying to steady his hands. He needed to keep the ship moving, keep it from being found. But Leo was right. The systems were barely functional. They couldn't outrun anyone. They could only hope to hide and pray they weren't found. The approaching ship stopped outside, hovering just above them. Jack's heart pounded in his chest. Every second felt like an eternity. He watched the radar, waiting for any sign of movement. Then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, the ship's signal disappeared. It was gone. Jack stood frozen for a moment, unsure if he could trust his eyes. Had they left? Or were they still out there, watching, waiting for them to make a move? He didn't know, but for now it didn't matter. He looked at Leah, his breath still coming in sharp bursts. "We made it." Leah didn't smile. She didn't even speak. But Jack could see the same relief in her eyes. They had survived another moment. And that, for now, was enough. The silence in the ship was deafening. Jack sat at the control panel, his fingers lightly tracing the edges of the buttons. His mind was racing. They had escaped the mysterious ship, but now what? The danger was still fresh in his mind, the fear lingering in the corners of his thoughts. He glanced over at Leah, who sat nearby, her face unreadable. She hadn't spoken much since they'd hidden from the other ship, and Jack knew it was because she was still processing everything. Jack had hoped that after the close call, Leah might feel safer, but he could see the weight of uncertainty on her face. She was lost just like him, trying to survive in this cold, empty part of space. For a brief moment, Jack wondered if there was any real escape from this endless drifting. Was there anywhere for them to go? Are we safe now? Leah's voice broke through his thoughts. It was quiet, soft, but it carried an edge of desperation. Jack turned toward her, his face serious. "For now, yeah. But we can't just stay here. We need to keep moving." Leah nodded but didn't look up. Jack could see the hesitation in her eyes. She wasn't sure where to go, what to do. The question was the same for both of them. What now? "I know it's not easy," Jack said, his voice gentle. "But we've got options. We'll find a way." Leah finally met his eyes, her expression filled with uncertainty. "Do you really think we can fix this ship? Can we even make it work?" Again, Jack paused, thinking. He wasn't sure. But one thing was certain. He couldn't let this be the end. He couldn't just give up on her, on this ship. They had come so far. "We'll try," Jack said with conviction. "I'll do everything I can. I know I can fix this. We're not giving up." Leah looked at him, her eyes flickering with something, maybe hope, maybe trust. Jack couldn't be sure, but he saw a small spark in her gaze that wasn't there before. He wasn't sure if it was for him, for the ship, or for herself. But it was there. They spent the next few hours working together. Jack focused on fixing the engine, rerouting the damaged power cells, while Leah helped by searching for any parts that could still be used. It wasn't easy. The ship was ancient, its systems broken and falling apart. But Jack had always believed in making the most out of what was available. He had learned that in the hard years he'd spent alone in space. You didn't get many chances, and you had to take them when they came. As the hours passed, Jack could see the frustration building in Leah. She wasn't used to being around people, and she wasn't used to relying on someone else. He could tell she was starting to doubt if they could really fix it. And in some ways, he was doubting too. But he couldn't stop now. He couldn't afford to give up. Not when they were so close. The control panel flickered to life, a faint glow lighting up the darkened room. Jack's heart skipped a beat. It was small, barely noticeable, but it was enough to give him hope. "Leah, look!" Jack exclaimed, pointing at the screen. Leah stood up, her eyes wide with disbelief. "It's working," she said softly. Jack smiled, a sense of accomplishment flooding him. "We're getting there. We just need a little more time." But as soon as he spoke, the ship shook, the warning lights flashing again. Jack's stomach dropped. The power surge had triggered something, but it wasn't good. The ship was starting to fall apart. There was no time to waste. "Jack!" Leah cried out, her voice panicked. "What's happening?" "Hold on!" Jack shouted, running to the control panel. The shaking grew stronger, the ship groaning under the pressure. The systems were failing again. The repair had been temporary. And now the ship was falling apart faster than they could fix it. The lights flickered and went out. The ship was plunged into darkness, the only sound the clanking of metal and the hum of failing systems. Jack's heart pounded in his chest. They were running out of time. They couldn't stay here. Not with the ship falling apart. "Leah, we need to go," Jack said, his voice urgent. "Now." Leah looked at him, her face pale and her eyes wide with fear. She didn't hesitate this time. She ran with Jack toward the emergency escape pod. The ship was no longer a place of safety. It was a trap. The walls were closing in around them, and they had no choice but to leave. They reached the pod just as the ship's engines exploded, sending a shockwave through the hull. The force of the blast knocked Jack and Leah to the ground. For a moment, everything went black. When Jack opened his eyes, he found himself in the escape pod. Leah next to him, both of them strapped in for safety. The pod was shaking as it shot away from the wrecked ship. The explosion had sent them flying into space, but they had made it. They were alive. "Are you okay?" Jack asked, his voice low. Leah nodded slowly, still dazed. "I think so." She stopped, her words fading as she looked out the small window of the escape pod. Jack followed her gaze and saw the wrecked ship in the distance, drifting aimlessly in space. It was destroyed, gone. But they had made it out. "We made it," Leah whispered, a mix of disbelief and relief in her voice. Jack smiled, looking at her with a sense of pride. "Yeah, we did." They were alone now, but they were free. The universe was wide, and their options were endless. They had no ship to call home anymore, but they had each other, and that was enough. Leah finally spoke, her voice quieter this time. "Where do we go now?" Jack looked out at the stars, feeling the weight of the question. There were so many possibilities, so many directions they could go. But one thing was clear, he wasn't alone anymore. He wasn't the only one drifting. In the endless void of space, "We go wherever we want," Jack said, his voice steady. "Together." And with that, they drifted into the unknown, ready to face whatever came next.